The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent which will even roll stones along in its course. The quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Therefore, the good fighter will be terrible in his onset and prompt in his decision. This is a quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Today, we're joined by a special guest who holds the coveted OSCP certification. You may recognize him as one of the community managers for offensive security, but he also works in the industry as a penetration tester and a community leader in several online communities. He is a fellow warrior in our landscape of computer systems, who with great wisdom uses his powers for good as he helps people grow their minds to protect companies and friends alike. Welcome, FalconSpy. And today we have the opportunity to give out a course voucher from Offensive Security. So if you would like to learn more information about that, please stay tuned to myself and FalconSpy, and we would be happy to make that happen for you. So, FalconSpy, thank you so much for joining us, and tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I guess real quick about myself, I have two wonderful Shiba Inus, a wonderful wife. I work as a penetration tester full time during the day, and then on the off side, in the evenings, usually I'll do community management for offensive security, bringing projects to all of you who are interested in our courses, in our company. Um, just trying to make sure we're giving back to you as much as we can.
And what originally sparked your interest in the field?
Yeah, so it was kind of like an interesting thing. So I originally wasn't always interested in information security. I was actually originally interested within computer science and doing software development and things like that. Kind of just trying to take after my father. You know, he was a big part of my inspiration for wanting to getting into computing. And in my freshman year of college, I kind of realized that I didn't necessarily enjoy doing coding day in and day out. Wasn't that I was doing terrible in grades, but it just wasn't enjoyable. And at the time, there was a number of different like profile hacks going on by lolsec and anonymous and all these other different things going on. So, I found it really interesting. I was like, oh, I'd like to know what they're doing to be able and like understand what they're doing to be able to do it. But also, I wanted to understand it so I could then try to defend it. So I originally wanted to be kind of like, I thought about it. It's like, oh, well, what if I become one of them, like so to speak, in terms of I have to think nefariously, but then I could use that to try and help companies or help others. So that's kind of how I got where I am.
And I don't know if it's been your experience, but it certainly has mine. There's been a need for balance. You know, working a blue team role or a red team role, there's a need for developing a well-rounded skill set. Has that kind of been your experience too?
Yeah, so I can't really speak too much to it. I haven't actually had a blue team role. I mean, I've been a system administrator before in some of my previous experiences, but I wasn't necessarily doing like incident response and detection and things like that. I was kind of just patching systems, making sure Active Directory is looking clean, and people who don't need to be there aren't there anymore. So, uh, however, I do think a good balance is required, just so you have an understanding as a blue teamer what red team tries to do, and as red team you have to understand what the blue team is trying to do, and also how they can try to stop people, such as people from the red team or APTs, things like that.
For penetration testing, what's a normal day look like for you on the job?
Yeah, so I work for Oracle as an internal pen tester, and I primarily handle things within their cloud infrastructure. So our version of like AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. Uh, and day to day, it's usually just, at least for me, since I'm still relatively new to the company in the field, it's usually just trying to flatten my learning curve. But day to day, like every single time we launch some new regions, I'm doing internal pen tests on those to make sure before it goes live and we release it to the customers, everything is secure, and it aligns with the other regions that we're standing up. We have other internal services that are required for the cloud to work properly. So in addition to those region launches, I'm also assessing these other services to make sure there are no vulnerabilities within them.
And I think people will be maybe a little surprised to hear that there's internal roles, like especially people relatively new to the field. They may be surprised that companies will have their own internal teams. I think many people understand that there's a consultancy aspect to our field, but in your experiences working at the company you do, has there been any, I guess, challenges in your way that turned out to be great learning experiences?
Yeah, so everything so far has been pretty, in terms of learning experiences, great, just because I haven't delved too much into cloud even before joining Oracle. I'd play around with AWS and Azure and all these other platforms here and there and just spin up an instance, but I never really got into the nitty gritty of like setting up policies, setting up identity access and management, or IAM for short. So everything's since I've joined the company has been pretty helpful in terms of growth and career development.
Okay, so from how did you get from we'll say graduating high school? How did you get
Right.
to where you are now from that point? What was your career path like so far?
Yeah. So as I had previously mentioned, a lot of my focus was trying to become, a software developer, or someone who kind of majors in computer science, as I was trying to take after my father. So uh, I ended up going to Rochester Institute of Technology in upstate New York and specializing in their computer science program. They actually didn't really have uh, a well-established computer security program at the time. It was kind of just getting spun up. But yeah, so as I mentioned in my freshman year, I realized it wasn't for me, and then I switched into their pretty brand new major that they had created called Information Security and Forensics. And this was probably at the end of my freshman year when I had switched in. A lot of the courses that they were teaching were kind of mostly around concepts. It wasn't just like, hey, here's a methodology or like, and this is how you would apply it. It's kind of just like, hey, here's the concepts of like writing a computer worm or a virus or a Trojan, because like I did have an intro to malware class, and like they made us write something pretty basic, but it was mainly just covering the concepts. And then same thing with like computer hacking or doing pen testing. I had a course where it's just, hey, like here's some of the greatest hacks that went on in the course of history. Oh, and by the way, we have a lab for you where we have a Windows XP machine and then at the time, Backtrack. Just run this tool called Armitage and that has like a Hail Mary. Like go for it, right? Like they didn't really teach anything too specific. But since then, since I've graduated, my university has actually built a whole new school and department and everything, and they've built it up since then. But yeah, so the long version, or the I guess the too long didn't listen version of this is probably better. Um, After graduating from RIT, I had a career in system administration where I worked at a couple of Fortune 50 companies before Oracle. As I said, doing system administration, primarily dealing with like web and middleware services, so like Apache Tomcat, Nginx, you name it, IIS on Windows. So um, and then after I had acquired my OSCP certification in May 2019, I started applying everywhere that I could think of that had, pen testing roles, red teaming roles, and it was pretty rocky, it was pretty rough at the time. And I had a coworker at Oracle who was on the red team, and he reached out and said, "Are you still interested in doing pen testing or red teaming work? And we're hiring here at Oracle. Pass me your resume if you're still looking." And then, the rest is history in terms of Oracle. Uh, so in terms of pen testing, there's that. And then for offensive security, how I got there was kind of just helping out in the community, trying to give back as much as I can, where joining different communities, answering questions, helping answer questions about OffSec certs, not just specific to the OSCP certification, even though that's primarily what I have a big focus in, because that's what I've done. Um, trying to kind of write some articles back to them after I finished my certification. So just like, hey, here's some helpful tools that you could use, typical commands, notes. But I think a big portion of it also was writing about my failures from the certification exams. I think those are pretty helpful because at the time, I didn't really find too many failure, I guess, blog posts, and maybe I just didn't look hard enough. But I figured it'd be best if I wrote some articles to help those in need who may also be struggling to pass their certification exam.
When I was going through my studies, I kind of felt the same way. There wasn't a whole lot of experiences surrounding failures, and having not seen other people's experiences like that, I don't want to say it discouraged me in a sense, but just not understanding that there's a whole lot of other perspectives out there, kind of ended up pigeonholing myself into putting off the studies for a while. So I think that's awesome. Okay, so you were a system admin, and then you became a penetration tester, and then you started getting more involved in the community, and then through doing that you became a community manager with offensive security. Had you ever tried applying for pen testing jobs before OSCP?
I didn't, just because I didn't really have a whole lot of experience, and from everything that I've read into and spoken to people within the field. So when I was working at one of these Fortune 50 companies and volunteering for the red team there, a lot of people were saying, you got to get your OSCP certification because it's a great certification to have to help you get your foot in the door. It's not a guaranteed to obviously get you a position within pen testing or red teaming, but it definitely helps. So I didn't even bother attempting to apply anywhere, just because I wanted to make sure I did have the OSCP certification within my grasp.
And then how was your experience looking for pen testing jobs after you had achieved your OSCP? Do you feel like it was overall a pleasant experience, or maybe there was something that was kind of lacking?
Yeah, so it wasn't as pleasant as I was hoping it was going to be. I had applied to a number of different companies out there. Some gave me challenges to do, where I had very little experience, and that's something the OCP certification didn't give me experience in. One company gave me a web app challenge where it's just like find as many vulnerabilities as you can, root the box, find all the flags that we have. Um, and it was all centered around a web app. So a lot of the OCP certification doesn't cover web app pen testing and trying to find all the vulnerabilities or the things like the OWASP top 10 or misconfigurations that you should be looking for. Um, so that job interview made me realize that there's obviously way more that I have to learn, and that I should really try to focus on doing web app pen testing next, as something that I should really look into. Some other opportunities that came up from applying around were other kind of challenges where they gave me similar buffer overflow, like what we would see in the course materials, um, and something that you might even like kind of like see, like kind of almost like exam style, but it's not exactly the exam. Um, and the company that I was dealing with that, they weren't, I guess, too appreciative of my time. So they would send me things late, or they would communicate really late, or they just wouldn't communicate at all. I've had other companies who I would start to fill out their form, I'd do their challenge and never hear back from them. There are some companies where I'd set up the interview and then they just no show me. So it wasn't as pleasant as I was hoping it was going to be, as I had previously mentioned. But that's just my experience, and maybe maybe you experienced something else, or for anyone who's listening, hopefully you'll experience something else.
I wish I could say mine was different. After OSCP is a little bit different than before OSCP for me. So like after OSCP, I really only applied for one job, and that was the job that I'm currently doing, and it was I wouldn't say it was a walk in the park, but it was a pretty easy process overall for me. But I mean, after I got out of the Air Force and was looking for jobs, I mean, very similar experiences. Like companies would no show me, or they'd um, almost set me up to fail in some interviews. Like they just give me some impossible scenario where it's like easy to digest at the surface, but they were looking for a really specific answer. So I think that's incredibly valuable information for people to hear. The field has a lot of different subfields. You know, we've got cloud, we have web app, internal, external, Active Directory. Which of these has been the easiest for you to learn, and which has been the most challenging?
Yeah, so I can't really speak too much to the different fields just because I've had limited experience across each of the different fields. You know, so for me, everything that I've been doing so far has just been internal outside of the certification. Um, I guess it's internal related to the cloud, but I'm not actually doing like cloud pen testing. Um, so I can only really speak to the internal, so I can't really say what's easiest. But I guess I could say what's hardest so far between internal and doing web app from the challenges that I've received from job interviews. Obviously, web app is hardest for me just because I have no experience, and internal would probably be the easiest, at least right now, given my current experience, just because that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So while there is still a learning curve on that day job, it's getting easier and easier as the days goes on, just because I'm learning more. I have uh, an awesome team that helps support me. There's no such thing as a stupid question with them, except if you ask the same question multiple times, you just never learn the answer to it. Um, so yeah, I would say just internal is the easiest for now, and web apps the hardest, just given my current limited experience.
Relatable for me. Web has always been like a very tough point. It's just like it's so huge. Like it's almost like an entire field on its own. But even then, like Windows privilege escalation for a long time was something that really held me up.
Right.
Um, so taking all of that information in, what do you think are some valuable resources for people wanting to get into the field?
Yeah, so there's plenty of good resources out there. There's a number of competitors to OffSec that you could probably use. There's our platform as well, Proving Grounds, that will help you kind of practice. Although there's no specific machines in there that are kind of like focused on the PWK or the OSCP certification. It's kind of just our version to the competitors that are out there in terms of labs that you can just go into and kind of just start hacking away and not have to worry about getting prosecuted or being brought to court or anything or being put in jail. So, um, but in terms of resources, there's plenty of things out there on like Udemy, or there's just plenty of free resources out there that people put out on like YouTube, that kind of teach concepts, and methodologies and other things out there. So IPSec is a great resource out there. He posts a bunch of videos, kind of explaining his methodology and his thought details. You have other streamers out there like Al, who I believe you've covered in a past interview. He does plenty of informational streams on Twitch that's pretty helpful. You have other people out there like Tiberius as well, who puts out a bunch of courses and tools that are useful. So there's really no shortage of, I guess, free resources that you can get access to. Um, there's obviously the other resources that you can pay for, like our certification and the other different competitors out there as well that might offer something. So there's definitely no shortage.
How has becoming more integrated with your communities changed your perspective on learning?
Yeah, so being a lot more integrated with the community has made me realize, in addition to all my kind of interviews that I had failed, there's plenty to learn. There's no shortage of people out there who are in the same boat as me, looking to learn. Um, and having these people to interact with in the various communities kind of just helps support myself, and I'm also trying to give back to them to support them. So um, there's plenty of people out there who are looking to help you, as long as you're willing to also help yourself and help them as well in their endeavors to try and learn something new.
Yeah, and the whole backstory of me coming into one of the communities that you are a very big driving factor behind InfoSec Prep. The whole reason I found InfoSec Prep in the first place was because of a blog post that you had done on OSCP approved tools.
Mhm.
And I was surprised to find one of mine was in there. RevShell Gen was just like a really haphazardly thrown together solution for a problem that I was having. I didn't want to keep going back to Google and looking up all of these crazy reverse shell commands. So I mean, in a way, through you has been one of the fastest and I would say most progressive moments in my career so far. I think having since joined that community, I feel like I've really grown the fastest out of all of the previous time spent doing self-study.
Yeah. I mean, to your tool that you made, I mean, I used it for my OCP journey. Whether you say it was kind of really crudely put together or not, like it was still helpful. It definitely uh, it alleviated my issue of going to Google constantly and trying to look up, reverse shell commands and things like that. So it's definitely helpful. And I believe you've since remarketed the tool since then.
Yeah, it's actually become like grown completely out of my control now. There's like 4 or 5 contributors to it.
Nice. Yeah, so I mean, the tools aren't necessarily officially approved by OffSec, and even though I work for them, they're still not technically approved. These are just tools that don't really perform any auto exploit features, and which is obviously something banned within the exam. Um, but yeah, any of the tools that seem like they'd be helpful for somebody within the labs or even in the exam and don't perform auto exploits, I kind of just add them to the list.
And just kind of off the cuff, speaking of tools, maybe not just for studying, but maybe even on the job too. Which do you think has been the most beneficial for you? I guess in terms of like how widely you can use it or how many different situations you can use it in.
Yeah, so a lot of the tools that I'm using at Oracle are internally developed, so I can't really speak too much to them. But as to the ones that are not internally developed, I've been using Burp a lot, obviously, for doing a lot of web API endpoint testing, things like that. Um, and if you're in the OSCP, I'm sure you've touched Burp at some point, or you will in the near future as you're going through your journey. For those who are tuning in, um, I mean, there's been a couple of other tools like Tiberius has created, and ones the one that you created that have been pretty helpful.
Yeah, Burp Suite has definitely been a big one for me. I don't think I would be able to do many aspects of my job without it. Okay, so as your following continues to grow, what's the goal for your platform? What do you hope to achieve, or what do you hope to like inspire in other people?
Yeah, so I want to inspire those who are, I guess, struggling to, I guess, reach their goals for these certifications and break into the field. Like I want to help be that kind of individual who helps drive them and helps motivate them a little bit more. Obviously, a lot of that comes down to their own motivation, their own dedication. But I want to be an advocate for them and help them kind of have that growth and that potential to break into the field. Um, I don't really have any one particular thing that I'm obviously focusing on, but if there's things that I can do to give back to anyone, I'm going to do it.
And I think that's awesome, and I think more people should, because like maybe some people will, they'll look at a lot of like the bigger names in our industry, and they'll say, oh well, I can't relate to this person at all. They're just existing in another world from me. But I think people that are willing to put themselves out there should, because just that different perspective can really change a lot. For 2021, what do you want to do for yourself? How do you hope to change the life of FalconSpy?
Yeah, so for 2021, in terms of my own career growth, obviously everything I'm doing at Oracle to flatten my curve, but I'd also like to focus on web app pen testing. As I mentioned, I failed one of those challenges. It kind of made me realize that it's something I should work on. And plenty of things out on the internet have a web app that you interface with, and that's usually pretty much one of the main ways that an attacker gets into a system or a bunch of systems is through a faulty web app or a vulnerable web app. So I think it's probably within my best interest and maybe some other people's interest as well to kind of at least explore the web app pen testing field.
If you take like little steps in small directions that you know you need to go, like the bigger goal just kind of forms itself. Do you feel like it's kind of the same way that it works out for you?
Um, I guess if you would ask my wife, I don't really plan too often, but at least for my career, this is something I've been trying to plan for. So like I do have obviously that larger goal, and I try to break it up into the smaller goals. So the first goal was obviously get my OCP certification. The next goal was start applying to different jobs that maybe they would hire a junior pen tester, and I can do their challenge properly and have that opportunity to kind of get to the final stage and finally get hired. And then like my newest smallest goal was, and for some people it might be a large goal, but like is to get that web app pen testing kind of certification under my belt. So like the OSWE. I mean it's really just how each individual is. For me, as I said, I don't normally plan for things, but this is something I plan for since it's my career. And um, if I'm going to be working 40 hours a week, I want to be happy doing what I'm doing, which obviously most people I think would fall under that same category.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think maybe that's more actionable for people to take that larger goal and then break it down into smaller chunks, like you said, and makes it a little more easily digestible. Do you have any study tips for those that would be curious to know? Any strategies that have worked out for you that you think would work out for others?
In terms of like breaking goals down, or just like for like
So like
where we go, like
so like
what genre or topic?
Yeah, for example, let's say we have a student going through PWK and, maybe they have like a little bit of a foundation in IT in general, but maybe they're overwhelmed by just how big that course is and how deep it goes. What would you recommend to that person to kind of break through the mold of that course and, just be able to achieve their study goals with it?
Yeah, so in terms of the PWK, definitely for anyone who's starting the journey or is in the middle of it, make sure if you don't have a lot of experience in the field, or even kind of with networking and things like that, definitely go through the exercises and the materials, and make sure you actually do those exercises because they'll help kind of reinforce some of the things that you just learned from the materials. Um, and and those exercises at the end, if you've done them, you can kind of create a lab report and submit it for 5 extra bonus points, which may or may not save you. If you're at 65 points, you may get the certification, you might not. So it's definitely within your best interest, regardless, if you're new to the field, to run through the exercises, watch the videos, kind of read through the materials. Um, and then make sure you have kind of like an attack plan for every little thing that you do in the lab. So um, we call this a methodology. Make sure you kind of have a pretty well established methodology. It doesn't hurt to ask people what they do. If you decide to copy it, fine, but you should really try to make it your own. But once you do make it your own, or if you've copied it, just make sure you're constantly trying to follow that methodology. And there will be times where, maybe your methodology doesn't quite work out the way you need it to in order to kind of exploit a machine, but at least hopefully you'll at least have the foundation there for you. And then, with the try harder mentality that OffSec tries to give you is, try to improvise and think outside the box. We don't try to use that model as just like a, good luck, do what you can. It's kind of just more supposed to be to get you to think outside the box and improvise. And that's really what a lot of pen testers and red teamers need to do if, their methodology doesn't work, or they have to think differently to attack something. So nothing is always the same, and that mentality just helps you improve, I guess, as well.
I totally agree. When the course was long ago, back in the days of pen testing with Backtrack, it was a little bit of like you're thrown into the deep end and hope you float kind of situation. But I mean, I've seen that course evolve over the last 10 years, and I think offensive security has really taken it in a great direction.
Yeah, so I actually started my PWK journey, or sorry, the OSCP journey, when it was pen testing with Backtrack. So I was actually in those courses as well, and this is actually when I was working at my first Fortune 50 company, and this is when I was really trying to see if I can do what I can to break into the field. So this was maybe 5 years ago or so, back when it was still pen testing with Backtrack, and I didn't have any experience. My university didn't really prepare me as I needed, and I thought, okay, well, hopefully the materials here will prepare me, and they helped, but it obviously wasn't enough. And I actually never ended up taking the pen testing with Backtrack like exam at the time for the OSCP, just because I kind of just let my lab time expire, and I realized I didn't have the necessary skills or experience or anything, or anything behind it at the time. And plus there was an unfortunate circumstance that happened. But yeah, after offensive security had updated the materials to pen testing with Kali, things became a bit more, a little bit more defined than what it was in pen testing with Backtrack. And then obviously also some of the volunteering that I did with the red team at one of these companies did help as well. So,
And it's very relatable for me. A very, very similar experience on my behalf. But that brings up an interesting. I know we're going like completely off the rails with the questions now, but I'm kind of curious how do you feel your studies in higher education kind of? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how do you feel that experience differed from maybe your experiences learning through courses like those offered by offensive security?
so again, to my university's credit at the time, it was a brand new kind of major, and they didn't really have a lot of things hashed out in terms of like course materials. As we previously talked about, a lot of it was kind of just high level concepts, and nothing was really just like, hey, here are the different kind of tools that you can probably try to look into, understand how they work for yourself. There was none of that. There was no, like, this is a methodology, and like, here's what you should do to create your own, or create one, or if you're copying someone, modify it for yourself. um, so at least just for my experience, the higher education wasn't all that helpful. But I would imagine now that a lot of these different universities have created programs around information security. I would imagine they're a lot more helpful than they were when I was going through it. So, um, but I don't have any experience with that because I haven't been back to college since I've graduated to see how the programs are. But the course materials from offensive security definitely helped fill in some of those gaps that my university didn't cover. Volunteering for one of my company's red teams, and kind of doing Vuln Hub boxes and all these other things, and the free resources that we talked about in the past on here, kind of also helped fill in some of those gaps that my university didn't provide.
It's kind of surprising to hear, but I mean, on the other hand, I've heard similar things from other guests. It seems like higher education has a really hard time keeping up with the industry, but that's also kind of surprising, just given the amount of resources that they're gifted, I guess. So I'm not sure why keeping up to date is such a struggle point for higher education. What challenges do you see facing infosec or pen testing in the coming years?
So, I mean, it's always a game of cat and mouse within the field. The blue teamers, if you will, or the defenders are always trying to catch up, and they're always trying to make sure they have the latest and greatest virus definitions, and and anti-spyware and malware if you're going that route. So they're always playing catch up with that. There's no kind of blanket catch all in that route. We there's always catch up on the defenders end because they're always trying to make sure they're putting things in place to make sure things don't happen again. It's usually pretty hard to be retroactive with it. I mean, if you want to be retroactive, you have to have your own internal pen testing team. You have to hire a bunch of third-party teams to kind of do the consulting pen test for you, and hopefully they're doing a great job and they're not just handing you a Nessus report or something like that. Because there's been plenty of horror stories that I've seen online and talking to people within the communities that they've had a third party company come in and they'll say like, yeah, we'll do a pen test for you, and then they just hand them a Nessus scan and they're just like, go fix it.
I guess it's kind of relatable to at least one concern that I have. Automation coming to the field. In some ways, it's a good skill to pick up, but on the other hand, I really see it cutting back on a lot of what the job entails. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the automation, uh, at least for internal pen testing, is definitely helpful. You can set up the automation to run through a number of different Q&A tests that you would normally try to perform whenever you release a new product or kind of release like a new API endpoint or something. It kind of helps cut down on some of the testing that your internal testers might have to do, so they can focus on other services or things that come up. Um, so I don't think the automation, at least as someone who's creating pen testing tools or utilize them, I don't think automation's a terrible thing, as it does help give you opportunities to explore things that you want to focus on, or explore other things that you have time to explore because the automation is doing it for you. Now, automation obviously won't cover everything, so you might have to go back at one point or another to cover the manual parts that the automation didn't pick up. But it at least gives you an opportunity to kind of explore other options.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think it'll entirely replace, a human pen tester. I really don't think it can, just because of how nuanced the job really is. But definitely some interesting things to look forward to in the future. One issue that I kind of see. I mean, we have it going on today. I don't want to get like overly crazy with this one, but I mean, the gatekeeping, the way that people interact with other people in this community is just sometimes pretty hostile, and sometimes outwardly hostile. I'm curious to get your perspective. Being someone that both runs and is deeply ingrained in a lot of the online communities that surround our field. What do you think are some things people can do to either become like more involved with their communities, or maybe even just become at least like a smaller part of it?
Yeah, so I think I mean, the InfoSec community in general is obviously pretty big, and it's only growing. And I think with any community, there's always some kind of hostility and gatekeeping, unfortunately. But I think a lot of it has to do with just finding that community that works for someone. Uh, you know, see how the community is, see how they interact with each other. You know, is it all kind of just strictly business? Do they kind of mess around with one another? Do they troll each other, if you will? Do they have that one person who likes to get trolled and they don't care, and they just go with it? But like, in terms of joining the community, I mean, yeah, just find one that works for you. Do what you can to give back to it. Um, plenty of these people on the InfoSec Prep Discord server, they kind of do a follow for follow Friday or something on Twitter. I don't particularly do it just because I don't know if it would be considered controversial, given my position with OffSec. But so that's why I haven't ever done a follow for follow on there. But I think they're great. It definitely helps get other people out there. It helps build that community. Kind of helps, I guess, tear down some of those hostile walls, because now you have people who will help kind of come to your aid. If these individuals are kind of giving you a follow, or they're saying, hey, this person's really great, you should follow them. I would believe they would come to your aid or your rescue if you need defending or if you need help with something. So definitely try to find a community that works for you and uh, isn't as, I guess, toxic as people would say. And yeah, each smaller community is ran differently from others. So, and just know that smaller community does make up a portion of the larger community. So, um, definitely don't think that just because you interacted with a hostile community or community that says we're gatekeepers, like that's how infosec is. That's not how it is. A lot of people actually out there want to help you in your career growth, or at least within your growth of within the field, because there is a shortage of pen testers out there, and the infosec field is growing every day.
100%, my man. I will say though, if you've gotten to the point where you're worshiping a cloud provider as some sort of religious deity, you're probably you're probably gone a little too far with it.
I mean, yeah, if we're just speaking to infosec prep, hey, everyone has their preferred cloud provider. Whoop-de-doo. I'm not gonna fault them for it, but yeah, I mean, look, it's part of the community. Like that's what some of the that's what that infosec prep community has. Like, they have a small people within that community who are like, hey, AWS is great. Some are like the Azure cult or whatever, or Google Cloud. Like, it doesn't really matter. I can't really say anyone in there is pretty much OCI, but
It's part of the fun.
yeah, it just makes it fun. At least then you have some other people that you can like kind of look into, like oh, hey, like so and so like sub AWS also great. Like, now you have that also a small little bond with them. So um, yeah, just finding community that works for you is pretty key.
So what's next for you? You got any cool projects, speaking engagements, or other things that people might be interested in?
Yeah, so I did a recent B-Sides PDX talk about how we broke into the infosec field. So while I covered a small portion of it here in our chat here, I went into greater depth where it wasn't the too long didn't listen version. So that has been published now. But yeah, so for 2021 as well, and the future is getting the web app pen testing going down, and then. For offensive security, we have plenty of different projects that TJ and the rest of the company and I are working on to give back to the community. I can't really go too far into it, but a lot of it will be released within this year. I wish I could say more. I really do, just because it can help kind of build that hype. But I'm pretty sure I would get a good speaking to if I said anything more. So I would definitely just say stay tuned to offensive security social media, and hopefully we can release that info to you soon.
Well, I won't tell anybody. I'm just kidding. But so jokes aside, where can people find you? Where can they reach out to you? What are some good links?
Yeah, I am mostly being found on InfoSec Prep Discord. The links will be provided. You can find me on Twitter. I mean, I'm not much of a social person, and I don't really post anything too interesting, but you could definitely reach me on there through direct messages. Um, uh, if you're into playing games or whatever, you can find me on Steam as well under this nickname. And maybe you're a guardian and love to play Destiny 2. You can play some games with TJ and I whenever we're playing. Um, but yeah, I think those are some of the main two social platforms that you can pretty much reach me at any given point in time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, FalconSpy. I really appreciate you doing this for us and sharing your experiences and your perspectives on infosec and pen testing, and I really hope people were able to take this in and get to know you better, and how they can relate your experiences to their own. So once again, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
But with that being said, if you've ever wanted to 1v1 FalconSpy on Destiny, snipers only, ladies and gentlemen, smash those like and subscribe buttons. Check out his links in the description below. And we'll catch you all in the next one.